Hi everyone, Glenn here from mindovermenieres.com. I wanted to make this video today to talk to you about eating a low sodium diet. Now most of you know that sodium is a big trigger for a lot of people with Meniere's disease, and for those people, eating a lower sodium diet can really help to improve your symptoms. It's just not easy. It's a hard transition to make, especially because most people tend to eat a very high sodium diet. So I wanted to make this video to discuss some of the strategies that I use to adopt to a low sodium lifestyle, and hopefully it'll help some of you guys. Okay, so first things first, talk to your doctor, but most doctors seem to recommend anywhere between 1,200 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day. This obviously is going to vary from person to person, and every case is different. So tracking your diet, at least for a while, is going to be very important. And you can use the Mind Over Meniere symptom trigger tool, and I'll add it in the video description below to do that. And that will give you a better idea of how your body responds to sodium. But most doctors recommend between 1,200 and 2,000 milligrams a day. Now, it's also important to space that out as evenly as you can throughout the day. You want to maintain a steady sodium concentration in your body, and to do that, you want to make sure to drink a lot of water and spread it out. You don't want to fast for half the day and then eat a very high sodium meal in the afternoon. That's probably going to trigger you, or at least it does for me, and I will immediately get very dizzy, potentially have vertigo. Keep in mind too that salt is an acquired taste, so we learn to like salt. We can also learn to unlike salt, and it's difficult, but it does get easier with time. So you just sort of have to stick with it, and slowly your food will start to taste better. But there's also lots of little tricks and things that you can do along the way to improve the taste of your food. So the first thing we'll talk about now is going to the grocery store. How do you shop for low sodium food? Well, the number one rule is to read the FDA nutrition label on all of the food products that you're considering. The FDA mandates that food companies put the sodium content on there, so take advantage of that. Read everything. And keep in mind that low sodium foods don't necessarily mean they are low enough to be safe for someone who's triggered by sodium who has Meniere's disease. Low sodium just means it has less sodium than the original food product. So always make sure to check the labels on everything. Also, when you're planning meals, it's very important to consider the entire meal. So there's going to be salt and sodium in every single ingredient and piece of that meal. So even a simple lunch of like a sandwich and a bag of chips and a drink is going to have sodium, and the bread is going to have sodium in whatever's inside of the sandwich, and that could be multiple ingredients inside of the sandwich. There's going to be potentially high sodium in the bag of chips, and there will even be sodium potentially in your drink. Soda, for instance, has a lot of sodium, and that all adds up. So you want to factor that all into your thinking. Also, keep in mind that packaged and processed food products are going to be higher in sodium in general. So that's anything that comes in a package or a can or frozen, prepared, ready to eat, where you just have to heat it up. All those foods are going to use salt as a preservative, and they're going to be much higher in sodium. So try to stay away from those when possible. Also, some other foods to be careful with are any sort of sauces, condiments, dressings, marinades, seasonings. All of those type of things will tend to have a lot of salt on average. So just make sure to look for low sodium options. Also, when we're talking about food, bread can be very high in sodium. Cheese, yogurt, milk, soup, canned meats, deli meats especially will have a lot of sodium, although there are ways to get low sodium deli meats or no sodium deli meats. Any kind of crackers, chips, cookies, cereals, those kinds of things, all will have a lot of sodium. So just make sure to read the label and be selective. I find that going to premium grocery stores, if you can afford it, like Whole Foods or Fresh Market, usually have a much better selection of lower sodium foods. And snacks too. I've found that by having low sodium snacks, I am much less stressed out about the low sodium diet. Snacking was probably the biggest challenge for me early on, and finding snacks that were in the 0 to 80 milligrams of sodium range, although ideally you want to be under 50 milligrams, was a huge weight off my shoulders because I didn't have to worry so much about the serving size, and I can sort of snack more freely, which is something we sort of take for granted until we have to change our dietary habits. So finding low sodium snacks can really help. Also, when you're seasoning your food, I know I said to avoid, look out for certain seasonings and marinades. I want to give you some alternatives. So there's a lot of salt-free seasoning blends. You can find Mrs. Dash at most grocery stores. Mrs. Dash makes a whole wide variety of products that have no salt. Another interesting trick is to use Old Bay, which is typically used on seafood and crabs. But it has 1/3 of the sodium of table salt, and it has a very strong, salty, spicy sort of flavor. So you can get away with using a very little bit, and it adds sort of that salty taste to your food while actually adding very little sodium. So that's a great trick that I use. Also, using lemon as an ingredient I've found to be very helpful too. Salt is sort of an acidic, has an acidic taste, and lemon can sort of be almost like a substitute when used properly in cooking. So experiment and keep track of what works so you have a nice reference point for future cooking. So the next set of strategies have to do with restaurant and going out to eat at restaurants, and this introduces a whole new set of challenges. Fast food is basically off the table. Even the salads are going to have 1,000+ milligrams of sodium when you factor in the dressing, or the meats that are all pre-seasoned. Chain restaurants I find to be very difficult too. Most of the big chain restaurants are going to have very high sodium contents across their standardized menus. Now, there's always exceptions, and there will always, even at these restaurants, be something you can eat. I just find it's more stressful to go to big chains. At the other end of the spectrum is farm-to-table restaurants, which I find much easier to eat at. Most of the meat is prepared fresh. It's not pre-seasoned, and I usually have much more flexibility in what I'm ordering. At the very least, I've never been to a restaurant where I couldn't at least order something. I've never been to a place where I just couldn't eat anything. And you can always, in a pinch, just order a salad with oil and vinegar on the side, and if they can do it, meat without seasoning, like plain grilled meat. For some protein on top of the salad. So a little bit of a different set of challenges. Always talk to the waiter. Never be afraid to ask questions. Let them know you have a medical condition and that it's very important. When the waiter says, I can have them not add extra salt, that's not good enough. Chefs love to use salt. Not adding extra will still be too much. So keep those things in mind. Now, similar to restaurants, social gatherings and parties and things like that, family gatherings, is going to be something you'll have to deal with too. My strategy is always to talk to the host or hostess, let them know ahead of time, say, hey, is there any way that you can prepare the food without salt and have everyone salt their food at the table? Or could you keep some separate for me before you season everything or before you do put dressing on the salad? Most people are happy to accommodate. But of course, there's going to be situations where they won't be able to accommodate. Anytime there's a buffet or they're catering in food or there's a lot of people, it can get tricky. So in that situation, what I try to do is eat something ahead of time, bring a snack with me, and then just eat a very small portion of whatever everyone else is eating as to be a part of the evening. That's typically been my strategy. But most people are accommodating, and even if you're going to, let's say, a wedding, you can talk to the person and request that your meal be prepared without sodium. And then I was at a wedding just 2 weeks ago where they were able to accommodate me. So it's more common than you think. Okay, so the last strategy I want to talk about is travel. Now, when we go on vacations, there's already a lot of things going against us. The time change can be a trigger. The air travel is stressful. That could trigger us, and you're not going to be cooking for yourself most of the time. So how do you keep a low sodium diet when you travel? Well, first things first, when you're actually going to the airport on the day that you're going to be traveling, you can bring snacks with you. You can't bring liquids through the TSA security checkpoints, but you can bring food. And I didn't know this for a long time, but I do now. So anytime I travel, I always bring a whole bunch of snacks with me, so I never have to rely on the airport. It's very difficult to find low sodium snacks at the airport. So this is a great strategy. Sometimes I'll even bring extra so I have snacks with me where I'm going. Alternatively, you can stop at a local grocery store when you get to where you're going and buy snacks that way. It's easier most of the time than whatever junk food they'll have in the hotel gift shop or things like that. As for the restaurants you'll be eating at, my best advice is to plan ahead. Research menus, take your time, look up reviews, and make reservations. Have everything as planned out as you can. Now, I know this takes away from the spontaneity, but if you're traveling, and especially if you're traveling with family or friends who don't have the same dietary restrictions, this will make your trip so much less stressful. I can't tell you how much it helps. There's nothing worse than having vertigo or having your symptoms flare up in the middle of a vacation. So taking this step to plan ahead and know that all your restaurants are planned out and that there's things you can eat at all of them is a hugely beneficial way to go about travel. So that's all for me today. I will put links to some low sodium foods that I love in the video description below. I'll link to the dietary log and the sodium or the Mind Over Meniere symptom trigger tool in the video description below. And I will be back soon. Thanks, everybody.